When Billionaire was very tired, a toddler's lullaby gave his soul rest. The lullaby that reached his soul. The night had been endless. Not because of time, but because of weight. Ethan Blackwood sat alone in his private office, jacket discarded, tie loosened, eyes burning from hours of staring at numbers that no longer made sense. Meetings had piled on top of meetings. Decisions that affected thousands of lives had been made with a numb voice and an empty chest. He was tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. The city lights outside his window blinked like distant stars, indifferent to how heavy his body felt, how hollow his chest was. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, pressing his fingers against his temples. That's when he heard it. A sound so small, so fragile, he almost thought he imagined it. Musical note, hush now, hush now. Musical note. His eyes opened slowly. The sound was coming from the hallway. A child's voice, soft, uneven, barely holding the tune together. It wobbled, paused, then continued again, determined despite its imperfections. Ethan stood without realizing it, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. He followed the sound, each step slower than the last, as if afraid it might disappear if he moved too fast. In the dimly lit corridor, he saw her.
Isla.
She sat on the floor outside the guest room, legs stretched out, a small blanket clutched in her hands. Her eyelids drooped, but she kept singing, rocking slightly back and forth the way her mother did when she was tired. Her mother was inside the room, asleep after a long shift. Isla didn't notice him at first. Musical note, close your eyes, don't cry. Musical note. Her voice cracked on the last word. Ethan's throat tightened. He leaned against the wall, suddenly unsure of himself. This child, so small she barely reached his knee, was singing like she was trying to hold the world together with sound alone. Finally, Isla looked up and saw him. "Oh," she whispered, blinking. "You loud tired." "Loud tired," he repeated softly. She nodded seriously. "You make big size today." He hadn't realized anyone noticed. "I'm sorry," she added quickly, as if his tiredness were her fault. "I sing now. Mama sings when I'm tired." Something inside him shifted. He lowered himself onto the floor across from her, the expensive suit forgotten, the title meaningless. "You were singing for me?" She scooted closer and placed the blanket over his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world.
Yes.
Songs make heads quiet. She resumed her lullaby. Musical note, sleepy heart, sleepy mind. Musical note. It wasn't perfect. She mixed words, hummed when she forgot lines. But the sound wrapped around him gently, like hands smoothing wrinkled fabric. His shoulders dropped. His breathing slowed. For the first time in years, his thoughts stopped racing ahead. The noise inside him, the pressure, the constant urgency, began to fade, replaced by something warm and still. A tear slipped down his cheek before he could stop it. Isla noticed immediately. She paused, reached out with her tiny fingers, and wiped it away. Careful, serious. "It okay," she whispered. "Song working." Ethan closed his eyes. And for a moment, just one precious moment, he wasn't a billionaire, or a decision-maker, or a man carrying the weight of an empire. He was simply someone being sung to, someone being cared for, by a child who expected nothing in return. When the lullaby ended, Isla's head tipped forward. She fell asleep where she sat, still holding the blanket. Ethan didn't move. He stayed there on the floor all night, afraid that if he stood, the quiet inside him would break. And for the first time in a very long life,
his soul was at rest.
Yellow Heart, the lullaby that saved a soul. Marcus Thorne had everything except peace. At 52, he stood at the pinnacle of human achievement, at least by the world's measure. His name appeared on Forbes lists and financial networks. His signature closed deals worth billions. His decisions moved markets, created jobs, toppled competitors, and shaped industries. From his glass tower overlooking Manhattan, He could see the entire city spread beneath him like a kingdom, and in many ways, it was his. But tonight, as rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, Marcus felt nothing but the crushing weight of his own success. The meeting had ended 2 hours ago. His staff had long since departed, their footsteps fading down marble corridors, leaving him alone with the silence he'd been avoiding for years. He loosened his tie, Italian silk, custom-made, and poured himself another scotch. The amber liquid caught the light as he swirled it, watching patterns form and dissolve, form and dissolve. How many nights had it been like this? How many mornings had he woken at his desk, neck stiff, face pressed against quarterly reports that all said the same thing? More, more, more? His phone buzzed. Then again. Then 17 more times in rapid succession. Marcus didn't reach for it. For once, he couldn't summon the energy to care whether Singapore was having doubts about the merger, or whether the London office needed his approval on something that couldn't possibly wait until morning. He was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. This exhaustion lived deeper, in his bones, in his chest, in the hollow space where something vital used to exist. It was the tiredness of a man who'd been running so long he'd forgotten what he was running toward, or what he'd been running from. Marcus stood and walked to the window, pressing his palm against the cold glass. Below, the city pulsed with life. Yellow cabs weaved through traffic. People hurried along sidewalks with somewhere to be, someone to see. The world kept spinning, indifferent to whether Marcus Thorne was tired or not. His reflection stared back at him, gray at the temples now, lines carved deep around his eyes and mouth. When had he gotten old? When had the fire that once drove him dimmed to these cold embers? He thought of his ex-wife, Catherine, who'd left him 8 years ago. "You're already a ghost, Marcus," she'd said on her way out, suitcases in hand, eyes dry of tears. "You just haven't noticed yet." He'd been angry then, defensive. Now, seeing his hollow reflection, he wondered if she'd been right all along. No children. No family to speak of. His parents had passed within a year of each other, disappointed to the end that their brilliant son had chosen money over meaning. No real friends, only colleagues and competitors wearing friendly masks. No hobbies, no passions, no purpose beyond the next acquisition, the next victory in a game that never ended. What was it all for? The question hung in the air, unanswered and unanswerable. Marcus finished his scotch and reached for the bottle again, but his hand stopped halfway. Even the alcohol had lost its ability to numb him. He was beyond that now, existing in a strange limbo where nothing touched him anymore. Not pleasure, not pain, just an endless gray exhaustion. A sound from the hallway made him turn. At first, he thought he'd imagined it, his mind playing tricks, conjuring something to fill the suffocating silence. But then he heard it again, clearer this time. Singing. A child's voice, thin and uncertain, carrying a melody that wobbled and cracked but pressed forward anyway. Marcus frowned. There shouldn't be any children in this building at this hour. This was the executive floor, restricted access, security everywhere. Only his most senior staff had key cards for this level, and none of them had young children who would. The singing continued, growing slightly louder as if the child was moving closer. Against all logic and habit, Marcus found himself walking toward the door. He opened it slowly, stepping into the hallway's harsh fluorescent lighting. The singing stopped immediately. About 30 feet away, sitting cross-legged on the floor outside the maintenance office, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 3 years old, maybe 4 at most. Her dark hair was pulled into 2 uneven pigtails, and she wore pajamas covered in cartoon elephants. In her lap sat a stuffed rabbit with one ear shorter than the other, clearly loved to the point of threadbare. The child looked up at him with enormous brown eyes, startled but not afraid. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Marcus's first instinct was to call security. How had a child gotten up here? Where were her parents? This was a serious breach of protocol. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the exhaustion making him slow to react. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, curious and concerned, as if she could see right through his expensive suit to the emptiness underneath. "Hello," he said finally, his voice coming out rougher than intended. "Hi," she whispered back, clutching her rabbit closer. "You sad?" The directness of the question startled him. "What?" "You look sad. Like Mama when she cries in the shower." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. When was the last time anyone had asked him how he felt? When was the last time he'd allowed himself to feel anything at all? "I'm fine," he managed. "Where are your parents?" The little girl pointed at the maintenance office door. "Mama's working. She cleans the floors. She said I had to be very, very quiet because important people work here." She looked around conspiratorially and whispered, "But I was singing soft. Was I too loud?" Understanding dawned slowly. The cleaning staff. Of course. They came through after hours when the executives were gone. Usually Marcus was gone too. But tonight. "No," he said, surprising himself with the gentleness in his voice. "You weren't too loud. But it's very late. Shouldn't you be asleep?" She shrugged, a gesture so perfectly childlike it almost made him smile. "Almost. Can't sleep. Too bright here. Too much noise in my head." "Noise in your head?"
Uh-huh.
"Mama says when I can't sleep, I should sing. Songs make the noise go away." She tilted her head, studying him with unnerving intensity. "You got noise in your head too?" Marcus found himself sinking down to sit against the wall across from her, his body making the decision before his mind could object. His $5,000 suit pressed against the industrial carpet, and he couldn't bring himself to care. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "So much noise." The little girl nodded sagely, as if this confirmed everything. "That's okay. I know lots of songs. Mama taught me." She held up her rabbit. "Mr. Floppy knows them too." "Is that his name? Mr. Floppy?" "Uh-huh. He used to be Mr. Bunny, but then his ear got stuck in the washing machine and now he's Floppy, so." Another shrug, accepting the universe's logic with the easy wisdom of the very young. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a small crack in the ice that had formed around his heart. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophia. But Mama calls me Soft. What's yours?" "Marcus." "That's a big name. You must be very important." He let out a sound that might have been a laugh, though it felt rusty from disuse. "I used to think so." Sophia scooted forward slightly, dragging Mr. Floppy along. "You want me to sing for you? It helps. Promise." Every rational part of Marcus's brain said this was absurd. He should find this child's mother, ensure she understood the security protocols, return to his office, and the work that never ended. But the exhausted part of him, the part that was so tired, wanted nothing more than to hear this little girl sing. "Yes," he whispered. "Please." Sophia beamed, showing a gap where she'd recently lost a tooth. She positioned Mr. Floppy carefully in her lap, took a deep breath that puffed out her small chest, and began to sing. The melody was simple, probably something from a children's show Marcus had never watched, but Sophia sang it like it held all the secrets of the universe. Musical note, twinkle, twinkle, little star. Musical note. Her voice was sweet but imperfect, wavering on the higher notes, forgetting words and humming through gaps. Yet somehow, that imperfection made it more beautiful. There was no performance here, no artifice. Just a child sharing something precious, because a sad stranger needed it. Musical note, how I wonder what you are. Musical note. Marcus felt his throat tighten. When was the last time someone had done something for him without wanting anything in return? Every interaction in his life was transactional now. People smiled at him because he signed their paychecks. They laughed at his jokes because they needed his approval. They asked about his day because they wanted his ear for their own agendas. But this little girl with her uneven pigtails and worn rabbit didn't know who he was. Didn't know about his net worth or his influence. She just saw someone who looked sad and decided to help in the only way she knew how. Musical note up above the world so high. Musical note. The noise in his head, the constant calculations, the worries, the pressure, the endless what-ifs and must-dos began to quiet. Not dramatically, but gradually, like turning down a volume dial, so slowly you almost didn't notice until the silence arrived. Musical note like a diamond in the sky. Musical note. Marcus closed his eyes and let himself simply listen. Let himself be present in this strange, unexpected moment. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow's meeting or yesterday's failure. He wasn't composing emails in his head or strategizing his next move. He was just here. When Sophia finished the song, she looked at him expectantly, waiting for his verdict. "That was beautiful," Marcus said, and meant it. She grinned, clearly pleased. "I know lots more. Want another one?"
Please.
This time she sang, "You Are My Sunshine," and Marcus felt something break open inside him. A memory he'd kept buried for decades. His mother used to sing that song. He must have been 5 or 6, young enough that the memory was more feeling than image. She would sit on the edge of his bed, her hand cool on his forehead, and sing that same song while he drifted off to sleep. Back then, before the ambition took hold, before he learned that worth was measured in dollars and success in acquisitions, he'd been happy. Simple, uncomplicated happiness. What happened to that little boy? When did he disappear? "You crying?" Sophia asked, concern creasing her small face. Marcus touched his cheek and found it wet. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Certainly not at his parents' funerals. He'd stood stone-faced, accepting condolences with a firm handshake and dry eyes. Not when Catherine left, though maybe he should have. Not when the doctor told him the stress was literally killing him, that his blood pressure and cortisol levels were dangerously high, that he needed to change everything or risk a heart attack before 60. "Sorry," he said, roughly wiping his eyes. "I didn't mean to." "It's okay," Sophia interrupted, scooting closer until she was right beside him. She reached up and patted his arm with her small hand, the gesture so tender it made his chest ache. "Mama says crying is how our hearts take a bath. When they get too dirty with sad, tears wash them clean." Marcus let out a shaky laugh. "Your mama sounds very wise." "She's the smartest person in the whole world," Sophia agreed matter-of-factly. "She knows everything, like how to make the best grilled cheese, and how to get gum out of hair, and how to fix Mr. Floppy's ear even though it won't stay up anymore. Those are important things to know." "Uh-huh." Sophia leaned against his arm, her warmth seeping through his suit jacket. "Are you a daddy?" The question hit him like a physical blow.
No.
"No, I'm not." How come? How to explain to a child the choices that led him here? How to articulate the way ambition had consumed everything else, how success had demanded sacrifices he'd been all too willing to make until it was too late, until he woke up one day and realized he'd won the race, but lost himself. "I was too busy," he said finally. "I thought there would be time later, but there wasn't." Sophia considered this seriously. Mama says later is a trick word. It means never if you're not careful. Your mama is right about that too. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, this unlikely pair, the exhausted billionaire and the 3-year-old philosopher. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere distant, a floor buffer whirred. "Sophia?" A voice called from inside the maintenance office, sharp with worry. "Soft, where are you?" The door flew open and a woman rushed out, late 20s, tired eyes, hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore a gray cleaning uniform and moved with the quick efficiency of someone who'd been working double shifts for too long. She stopped short when she saw her daughter, sitting with Marcus. "Oh God," she breathed, her face going pale. "Mr. Thorne, I'm so sorry I told her to stay in the office. I just stepped away for a moment too." It's fine, Marcus interrupted, raising a hand. Really? She wasn't bothering me. The woman, her name tag read Elena, looked between them uncertainly, clearly trying to assess whether she was about to be fired. I can't apologize enough. I know staff children aren't supposed to be on this floor. My regular sitter was sick and I couldn't find anyone else, and I couldn't afford to miss tonight's shift, so I thought. Elena, Marcus said gently. It's fine. Actually, Sophia was helping me. Helping you? Elena blinked, confused. I was singing, Sophia announced proudly. He had too much noise in his head, so I sang it away. Elena's expression softened as she looked at her daughter, a mix of love and exasperation. Baby, you can't just bother people when they're working. But he wasn't working, Sophia protested. He was being sad. An uncomfortable truth, delivered with childlike simplicity. Marcus found himself standing, brushing off his suit more from habit than necessity. Now that the moment had been interrupted, he felt suddenly self-conscious. What must he look like, the great Marcus Thorne, sitting on the floor of his own building, crying while a toddler sang to him? But when he looked at Elena, he didn't see judgment. He saw understanding.
She knew what exhaustion looked like.
She probably saw it in her own mirror every morning. How long have you worked here? Marcus asked. 6 months, Elena said carefully. On the night cleaning crew. And before that, different buildings. I've been in cleaning services for 4 years now. Since. She glanced at Sophia. Since my daughter was born. The unspoken story filled itself in. Single mother. Working nights because it paid better, or because she couldn't afford daycare, or both. Raising a child alone while scrubbing the floors of buildings owned by men who made more in an hour than she did in a year. Men like him. I should let you get back to work, Marcus said. And I should return to my office. But he didn't move, and neither did they. Mr. Floppy says thank you for listening. Sophia piped up, making her rabbit bow. Marcus surprised himself by kneeling down to Sophia's eye level. Up close, he could see a small scar on her chin, probably from a childhood tumble. Could see the way her eyes were starting to droop despite her best efforts to stay awake. Could see the innocence and goodness that the world hadn't yet tarnished. Thank you, he said seriously, for sharing your songs with me. They helped more than you know. Sophia beamed and threw her small arms around his neck in an impulsive hug. Marcus stiffened. He wasn't used to being touched, especially not with such uncomplicated affection, but then he slowly raised his arms and hugged her back. She smelled like children's shampoo and graham crackers, and something indefinably sweet. Like hope, maybe. Like the future he'd never allowed himself. When she pulled back, she pressed Mr. Floppy into his hands. You can borrow him tonight. He's very good at chasing away bad dreams and making the dark less scary. Sophia, no, Elena started. Mr. Thorne doesn't need. I would be honored to borrow Mr. Floppy, Marcus interrupted, his voice rough. He held the worn rabbit carefully, like the precious thing it was. I'll take very good care of him. 'Kay. But you have to give him back tomorrow, 'cause he gets lonely without me. Tomorrow, Marcus promised. I'll bring him back tomorrow. Marcus returned to his office holding a 3-year-old stuffed rabbit and feeling like he'd slipped into some alternate reality. He set Mr. Floppy carefully on his desk, mahogany, imported, worth more than Elena probably made in 6 months, and stared at the incongruous sight. The worn rabbit with its lopsided ear looked ridiculous among his leather-bound folders and chrome accessories. Yet somehow, it was the only thing in the room that felt real. He sank into his chair and looked at his computer screen, where 47 unread emails waited. His phone, silenced during his encounter with Sophia, showed 32 missed calls and countless text messages. The world had continued spinning without him, and somehow it had survived. Marcus picked up Mr. Floppy and studied him more closely. The rabbit had clearly been loved hard, the kind of love that wore things down but made them more valuable, not less. One eye was slightly loose. The stitching around the shortened ear had been repaired multiple times with mismatched thread. There was a stain on one paw that looked like it might be grape juice. This rabbit had been held during thunderstorms and scary moments, had absorbed tears and witnessed laughter, had been the constant companion through a childhood that probably wasn't easy, given Elena's circumstances. And Sophia had offered to loan him to a stranger because she thought he needed comfort. When was the last time anyone had thought about his comfort? When was the last time anyone had truly seen him as a person rather than a position? Marcus set the rabbit down and opened his email, intending to clear at least a few messages before heading home. But as he read the first one, something about shareholder concerns and market positioning, the words seemed to float off the screen, meaningless. He tried the second email. Same thing. The third. Nothing stuck. Nothing mattered. He thought about Sophia asking if he was a daddy, and his answer. I was too busy. What a pathetic epitaph that would make. Here lies Marcus Thorne. He was very busy. His father had been busy too. Too busy to make it to Marcus's piano recitals. Too busy to teach him to ride a bike or throw a baseball. Always working, always chasing the next deal, the next dollar. And when his father died, all those hours spent at the office hadn't meant anything. His company had replaced him within a week. The work continued without him, indifferent to his absence. Marcus had sworn he wouldn't be like his father. Then he'd become exactly like him, only more so. The clock on his wall, Swiss, precise, expensive, showed 11:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, it would be a new day. Another chance to make the same mistakes, to run the same race, to ignore the same emptiness. Unless. The thought crept in quietly, barely a whisper. But once it arrived, Marcus couldn't dismiss it. What if he stopped? Not forever. Not dramatically. But what if he just stepped back? What if he chose differently? What if later didn't have to mean never? He thought of Sophia's mother, Elena, working night shifts to provide for her daughter. She probably had no savings, no safety net, no trust fund to fall back on. Yet she was raising a child who sang to sad strangers and offered her most precious possession to someone who needed comfort. What had all Marcus's money and power produced? What legacy was he building? When he died, and the doctor's warnings suggested it might be sooner rather than later, what would he leave behind except a fortune to be fought over by distant relatives who barely knew him? Marcus stood abruptly and walked back to the window. The city was quieter now, the rain heavier. He pressed his hand against the glass again, feeling the cold seep into his palm. His reflection looked back, older, tired, lost. But maybe not beyond saving. Help me, he whispered to no one, to God, to the universe, to the ghost of his better self. Please. I don't know how to do this anymore. I don't know how to be anything except what I am, and what I am is killing me. The silence that followed was profound. Then, from somewhere down the hall, he heard it again, Sophia's voice, singing another song as Elena cleaned the offices. The sound was faint but clear, carrying through the empty corridors like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Musical note, row, row, row your boat, gently down the stream. Musical note. And just like that, Marcus knew what he had to do. Not everything. Not all at once. But the first step. The first choice in a different direction. He returned to his desk and opened his laptop. Instead of reading emails, he opened a new document and began to type. Memo to Executive Board. Transition Plan. His fingers flew across the keyboard, words pouring out faster than they had in years. Not because he was angry or desperate, but because for the first time in decades, he knew with absolute certainty what needed to happen. He would step back. Not retire completely, that would be too much, too fast, and the company needed stability. But he would transition from CEO to chairman of the board. He would hire a proper successor, someone younger, hungrier, who still had the fire he'd lost. Someone who could run the company into the future while Marcus figured out what the hell to do with the rest of his life. He would reduce his hours.
Take weekends.
Maybe even a vacation. When was the last time he'd taken a vacation? He would find purpose beyond profit. He would learn what it meant to be human again. The words flowed for over an hour. When Marcus finally stopped, he had a rough draft of a plan that would reshape his entire life. His hands were shaking, and he couldn't tell if it was from fear or excitement or relief. Maybe all three. He saved the document and looked at Mr. Floppy, still sitting on his desk like a fuzzy guardian angel. "Well," Marcus said to the rabbit, "that happened." Mr. Floppy, silent sage that he was, offered no judgment. Marcus picked up the rabbit and walked back out into the hallway. He could hear a floor buffer running somewhere on the level below. He followed the sound down the stairs. When was the last time he'd taken the stairs? And found Elena working her way across the marble floor of the 42nd floor conference wing. She looked up, startled, when she saw him. "Mr. Thorne? Is everything?" "Where's Sophia?" he asked. "Asleep in the office." Finally, Elena turned off the buffer, worry creasing her face. "Is there a problem?"
No.
"No problem. Marcus hesitated. What was he doing? Why had he come down here? "I wanted to ask you something." Elena waited, clearly exhausted but trying to maintain professional composure. "When you look at your daughter," Marcus said slowly, "what do you see?" The question clearly wasn't what Elena expected. What do you mean?" "I mean, when you look at Sophia, what do you hope for her? What do you see in her future?" Elena's expression softened. "Everything," she said simply. "I see everything. A chance to be whatever she wants to be. A chance to grow up without the struggles I had. An education. Opportunities. A life where she doesn't have to work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on." "And you're doing this alone?" "Her father." Elena's jaw tightened. "He's not in the picture. It's just me and Sof. Marcus nodded. He'd suspected as much. "How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?" 27. So young. She'd had Sophia at 23 or 24, barely more than a child herself. Yet here she was, working night shifts, raising her daughter, instilling values that clearly went far beyond what money could teach. "I'm going to make some changes," Marcus said. "To the company. To everything. And I'd like your input on something." Elena blinked. "My input?" "I've been thinking about employee benefits. Childcare, specifically. I realize we don't offer any real support for single parents, or for parents working night shifts. That should change." "Mr. Thorne, I don't. I want to create a program. Maybe a daycare facility in the building, with extended hours. Or stipends for private childcare. Something that actually helps the people who work here, not just the executives." He ran a hand through his hair, aware of how strange he must sound. "I don't know exactly what it should look like. That's where your input comes in. You know what you need. What would actually make a difference." Elena stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're serious?" "Completely." "Why?" "Because your daughter's saying to me," Marcus said simply. "And because I've spent 30 years building something impressive and meaningless, and I'd like to spend whatever time I have left building something that matters." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help me figure it out. Meet with me tomorrow, during normal business hours, not while you're working. Bring Sophia if you need to. We'll talk about what would actually help, not what some consultant thinks would look good in a press release." "Tomorrow? Is 10 o'clock too early?" "Mr. Thorne, I work until 4 a.m. I won't have slept." "Then noon.
Or 2.
Whatever works for you." Elena wiped her eyes, clearly overwhelmed. "Okay. 2 o'clock. Thank you." "I don't thank you." Marcus wanted to say something profound, but all he managed was, "Thank you," for raising someone who still knows how to see people. He held up Mr. Floppy. "I'll bring him to our meeting tomorrow." A small smile broke through Elena's shock. "She's going to hold you to that." "I'm counting on it." Marcus didn't go home that night. Instead, he returned to his office and did something he hadn't done in at least 15 years. He slept on the couch. Not because he was working too late to make it home, but because he chose to. Because somehow, staying in the building where Sophia was sleeping down the hall felt important. Mr. Floppy sat on his chest as he lay on the leather sofa, staring at the ceiling. The rabbit was lumpy and worn, one ear flopping over its button eyes, but Marcus found it oddly comforting. He could understand why a child might clutch this against the dark. He thought about everything that had changed in just a few hours. Or rather, everything that had finally broken through years of carefully constructed walls. For so long, he'd measured success by numbers. Revenue growth, stock prices, quarterly earnings, properties acquired, competitors defeated. Each metric another brick in a monument to his own ambition. But lying here in the dark, holding a child's beloved toy, those numbers felt hollow as smoke. What was the point of it all? Not in some grand philosophical sense, but practically.
Day to day.
What got him out of bed in the morning? For years, the answer had been momentum. He got up because he always got up. He worked because he always worked. He pushed because that's what Marcus Thorne did. But what if he stopped? Would the world end? Would the company collapse? Would anything fundamental change? His phone buzzed on the desk. Even at 2 in the morning, messages kept coming. The machine never slept. Marcus silenced the phone without looking at it. Let them wait. For once, let the urgent become the merely important. He must have dozed off because when he opened his eyes again, pale dawn light was filtering through the windows. Marcus sat up slowly, his neck stiff from the awkward sleeping position. Mr. Floppy tumbled into his lap. 6:15 a.m. Normally, he'd already be showered, dressed, and reviewing reports. Instead, he sat there rumpled and unshaven, still wearing yesterday's suit, and felt strangely at peace. He heard movement in the hallway, the cleaning crew finishing up their shift before the day staff arrived. Marcus stood and walked to his office door, looking out in time to see Elena pushing a supply cart toward the service elevator. Sophia walked beside her, holding Mr. Floppy's less-loved cousin, another stuffed animal, this one a bear with a ribbon around its neck. "Mama, when do I get Mr. Floppy back?" Sophia was asking, her voice carrying clearly down the empty corridor. "This afternoon, baby. Remember? We're coming back to meet with the nice man." "Mr. Marcus," Sophia corrected. "He's not just nice. He's sad nice. That's different." "How is it different?" "Sad nice people need extra songs. Happy nice people just need regular smiles." Elena laughed, the sound tired but genuine. "You're a wise old soul, you know that?" "I'm not old. I'm 3.5. "Ancient," Elena agreed. "Practically a grandmother." Sophia giggled, the sound like bells. Marcus watched them until they disappeared into the elevator. When the doors closed, he felt an unexpected pang of loss, as if something precious had been taken away. Then he reminded himself, they'd be back in 8 hours. Elena had agreed to come back. A lot could change in 8 hours. Marcus returned to his office and pulled up the memo he'd drafted last night. In the harsh light of morning, with sleep deprivation making everything feel slightly surreal, he expected to cringe at what he'd written. Expected to find it dramatic and impulsive. But as he read through the words, he felt only certainty. This was right. This was necessary. This was overdue. He added a few clarifications, smoothed some rough edges, and then, before he could second-guess himself, he sent it to the entire executive board with a meeting request for Monday morning.
There. Done.
No taking it back now. His assistant, Margaret, who arrived promptly at 7:30 every morning and had been with him for 20 years, appeared in his doorway at 7:33. She took one look at him, wrinkled suit, uncombed hair, shadow of beard, and her eyebrows rose. "Should I ask?" she said. "Probably not. Are you ill?"
No. Yes.
Maybe. I don't know. Marcus rubbed his face. I'm making changes, Margaret. What kind of changes? The necessary kind. He gestured at his computer. Check your email. I've sent something to the board. Margaret pulled out her phone, scrolled, read. Her face remained professionally neutral, but her eyes widened slightly. This is significant. I know. The board will have questions. I'm sure they will. Marcus. She closed his office door and approached his desk, something she only did during serious conversations. Are you certain about this? Stepping back from CEO? You've built this company from almost nothing. It's your entire life. I know, Marcus said quietly. That's the problem. Margaret studied him for a long moment. What happened? Would you believe me if I said a 3-year-old sang me a lullaby?
No.
Well, she did. Marcus picked up Mr. Floppy from his desk. And somehow that changed everything. Margaret looked at the stuffed rabbit, then back at Marcus, clearly trying to determine if he'd had some kind of breakdown. Maybe he had. Maybe this was what breaking looked like, not shattering into pieces, but finally softening after being hard for too long. There's a woman named Elena on the night cleaning crew, Marcus continued. Single mother. She and her daughter will be coming by at 2 p.m. I need you to clear my schedule. For a member of the cleaning staff? Yes. Marcus. Margaret, in 20 years, have I ever asked you to do something that destroyed the company?
No.
Then trust me now. Please. She sighed, but he saw acceptance in her eyes. Your 2 o'clock is with the Singapore investors. Reschedule it. They flew in specifically to see you. Then they can meet with David. He's the CFO. He can handle it. Marcus stood and walked to the window. The city was waking up now, traffic thickening on the streets below. I'm tired, Margaret. I'm so tired of this being all there is. So, what will there be instead? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, My daughter got married last month. You sent a card and a generous gift. Of course. Did you know her name? Marcus turned, the question catching him off guard. Of course I do.
It's...
He trailed off, shame flooding through him. He couldn't remember. He'd signed the card Margaret put in front of him, approved the gift she'd selected, but he couldn't remember his own assistant's daughter's name. Sarah, Margaret said softly.
Her name is Sarah.
She's 26. She teaches 2nd grade. She married a man named Joel who works in IT. They're expecting their first child in October. Margaret, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just be better. She smiled, taking the sting out of the words. This change you're making, whatever prompted it, maybe it's long overdue. Will you help me? Always have, haven't I? After Margaret left to rearrange his schedule, Marcus finally went home to shower and change. His penthouse felt cavernous and cold, exactly like he'd left it 12 hours ago. Nothing had changed here, but everything had changed in him. He showered quickly, shaved, put on fresh clothes, but casual ones this time. Slacks and a button-down shirt instead of the usual suit. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself.
Good.
At 1:45 p.m., Marcus was back in his office, pacing nervously with Mr. Floppy tucked under his arm. Margaret buzzed through on the intercom. Elena Torres and her daughter are here. Send them in. Please. The door opened, and Elena entered tentatively, holding Sophia's hand. The little girl was dressed in a yellow sundress with daisies, her hair freshly braided. When she saw Marcus, her face lit up. Mr. Marcus. You have Mr. Floppy. I promised, didn't I? Marcus knelt down and offered the rabbit. Sophia took him carefully, hugging him tight, then looked up at Marcus with serious eyes. Did he help?
He did.
Very much. Good. That's his job. Elena looked around the office uncertainly. She'd cleaned this space 100 times, but had never entered it during the day, never sat in the chairs meant for powerful people making important decisions. Please sit, Marcus said, gesturing to the sofa rather than the formal chairs across from his desk. He wanted this to feel like a conversation, not an interrogation. Elena sat stiffly, Sophia climbing up beside her and swinging her legs. The little girl's feet didn't touch the floor. Would either of you like something to drink? Marcus asked. Water? Juice. I can have juice? Sophia's eyes went wide. If your mom says it's okay. Elena nodded, looking overwhelmed. Yes, that's juice would be fine. Marcus buzzed Margaret. Could you bring in some juice boxes? And maybe some cookies. Juice boxes and cookies, Margaret repeated, amusement clear in her voice. Right away. While they waited, an awkward silence settled. Marcus wasn't sure how to begin. How did you talk to someone whose reality was so different from your own? How did you bridge the gap between someone who decided whether to buy companies and someone who decided whether to buy groceries? Sophia, immune to awkwardness, solved the problem by sliding off the sofa and wandering to the window.
Wow.
You can see the whole world from here. Not quite the whole world, Marcus said, smiling. But a lot of it. Is that why you're here? So you can see everything? I thought so. But lately I've realized I wasn't really seeing anything at all. Sophia considered this, her small brow furrowed. That's silly. You have eyes. You're right. It is silly. Margaret arrived with a tray, juice boxes, cookies arranged on actual china plates, and a pot of coffee. Sophia's delight at this bounty was so pure it made Marcus's chest ache. Can I really have 2 cookies? She whispered to her mother. Yes, baby. It's okay. Once Sophia was settled with her snacks, Marcus turned his attention to Elena. She'd pulled out a worn notebook from her bag, clearly ready to take notes. The professionalism of the gesture, combined with how out of place she clearly felt, moved him. Elena, I want to be straight with you, Marcus began. Last night, when I sent that email about meeting, I had a clear idea of what I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to pick your brain about childcare benefits, employee support systems, that kind of thing. And I still want to do that. But I also want to apologize. Apologize? Elena looked confused. For what? For not paying attention. For building a company that made me billions, but didn't make sure the people actually keeping this building running could afford basic childcare. For being so focused on profit margins that I forgot about the human beings behind them. Elena shook her head slowly. Mr. Thorne, you don't owe me an apology. You gave me a job when I needed one. That's more than a lot of people did. A job that pays barely above minimum wage and offers no real benefits. A job that forces you to work night shifts and bring your daughter because you can't afford a sitter. Marcus leaned forward. That's not something to be proud of. That's something to fix. I don't understand what you want from me. I want your expertise. Expertise. Elena almost laughed. I clean floors. You're raising a remarkable child on a single income in one of the most expensive cities in the world. That takes skills I don't have. Intelligence I don't possess. Problem-solving capabilities that most MBA programs don't teach. So yes, expertise. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back quickly, probably used to not letting emotions show at work. I don't know what to say. Start by telling me what would actually help. Not what sounds good on paper, but what would make your life, and lives like yours, measurably better. For the next hour they talked. Elena was hesitant at first, but as Marcus asked genuine questions and listened to her answers without judgment, she opened up. She talked about the impossible choice between paying for childcare and paying rent, about the shame of bringing Sophia to work, always worried someone would complain, about the exhaustion of working nights and trying to be present for her daughter during the day, about missing Sophia's milestones because she was working 3 part-time jobs before she got this full-time position. She talked about other single parents on the night crew, about employees who took the bus for 2 hours each way because they couldn't afford to live near the job, about people working through injuries because they couldn't afford to take time off, about the quiet desperation of people who were employed but still couldn't make ends meet. And as she talked, Marcus took notes, real notes, writing things down in his own handwriting rather than delegating to Margaret, and felt his understanding of his own company shift. He thought he was building something great. Instead, he built something profitable that sustained poverty among the people it relied on most. What if, Marcus said slowly, we created an on-site childcare facility, open from 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. for night shift workers, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for day shift, subsidized for employees making under a certain threshold, maybe free for single parents. Elena stared at him. That would be, Mr. Thorne, do you know how much that would cost? Less than I spend on executive bonuses, I'd wager. And it would be a better investment. The board would never approve it. Let me worry about the board. Marcus made another note. What else? What about healthcare? We have healthcare, Elena said carefully. Basic coverage. But does it cover Sophia's regular checkups? Dental? Vision? What about if something serious happened? Elena looked down at her hands. The deductible is $4,000. If something serious happened, I'd be financially ruined. $4,000. For Marcus, that was dinner at a nice restaurant. For Elena, it was catastrophe. We're fixing that too, Marcus said firmly. They talked about transportation subsidies, about flexible scheduling for parents who needed to work around childcare, about education benefits, not just for employees but for their children, about paying a living wage, not just a legal wage. Sophia, bored with adult conversation, had curled up on the sofa with Mr. Floppy and fallen asleep, her head on her mother's lap. She was up all night, Elena said softly, stroking her daughter's hair. She never sleeps well when I bring her to work. Too much noise and light. Marcus looked at the sleeping child, mouth slightly open, one hand clutching her rabbit, small face peaceful, and felt something shift in his chest. A sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Elena, I need to ask you something else, he said quietly, so as not to wake Sophia. Would you be willing to work with me on this? Not cleaning, I mean really work with me. As a consultant, maybe eventually as a full employee in HR. To help redesign our benefits and policies. Elena's hand stilled on Sophia's hair. I don't have qualifications for that. You have the only qualification that matters. You know what workers actually need. I can hire people with degrees and credentials. I have plenty of those. What I need is someone with real experience, real insight. I don't know. The pay would be significantly better than your current position. Regular hours, benefits, an office, professional development if you wanted it. Why are you doing this? Marcus looked at Sophia, still sleeping peacefully. Because your daughter sang to a stranger when he needed it. Because she offered comfort without expecting anything in return. Because in 3.5 years, she's learned values that I spent 52 years forgetting. And because I want to build something that would make her proud when she's old enough to understand what her mother helped create. Elena wiped her eyes, tears flowing freely now. I need to think about it. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Elena, however you answer, the changes are happening. The child care center, the improved benefits, the living wages. That's not conditional on whether you accept this position. That's just what should have been done years ago. Can I ask you something? Why now? What really changed? Marcus considered the question. How to explain that sometimes a single moment of genuine human connection could shatter years of carefully constructed defenses. That sometimes you needed someone to see you, really see you, in order to see yourself clearly? I was drowning, he said finally. I'd been drowning for years, but I'd gotten so used to it I didn't realize until someone threw me a lifeline. Your daughter's songs, they reminded me what it felt like to breathe. Elena nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. She has that effect on people. Always has since she was tiny. She's remarkable. You've done an incredible job raising her. I'm doing my best. It's all any of us can do, right? Just keep trying, keep showing up, keep loving them even when we're exhausted and scared and don't know if we're doing anything right. That's more than I've done for anyone, Marcus said quietly. More than I've done for myself. Sophia stirred, blinking awake. She looked up at her mother, then at Marcus, momentarily confused about where she was. Then she remembered and smiled. Hi, Mr. Marcus. I had a dream you were a giant and you picked up all the buildings and put them in a basket. That sounds like an interesting dream. It was silly. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. Mama, can we come back tomorrow? I don't know, baby. Mr. Thorne is very busy. Actually, Marcus said, I'd like that very much. If you're willing, both of you could come back tomorrow. We could talk more. Maybe take Sophia to the park down the street? I haven't been to a park in... I can't even remember. Elena hesitated, then nodded. Okay, Saturday at the park. But Mr. Thorne... Marcus. Please, just Marcus. Marcus, she corrected, smiling slightly. This isn't about you trying to save us, is it? Because we don't need saving. We're doing okay. It's hard, but we're okay. I know, Marcus said. This isn't about saving you. It's about you saving me. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the newly completed child care center on the 5th floor of his building, watching children play in the bright, cheerful space. The transformation had been remarkable. What had been storage space was now a state-of-the-art facility with age-appropriate areas, qualified staff, and hours that actually worked for the employees who needed it most. 43 children were enrolled, including Sophia, and the waiting list had over 100 names. Mr. Thorne, one of the teachers approached. We're almost ready for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Thank you. I'll be right there. He walked through the center, observing the details Elena had insisted on. A quiet room for children who needed a break from stimulation. A nursing mother's space. A small kitchen for children with dietary restrictions. Nothing fancy or show-offy, just practical spaces designed by someone who understood what families actually needed. Elena stood near the entrance, wearing professional clothes that still seemed to surprise her. She'd accepted the position 3 weeks after their initial meeting, and in that short time, she'd already revolutionized the company's approach to employee benefits. The child care center was just the beginning. New healthcare policies, transportation subsidies, flexible scheduling, education assistance, changes that would cost Marcus millions but would save employees' lives. The board had been resistant at first. Several members had pushed back hard, arguing about profit margins and shareholder value. Marcus had listened to their concerns, then explained his position with a clarity he'd never possessed before. We can be profitable and decent. We can succeed without exploiting the people who make that success possible. And if you disagree, if you truly believe that our only obligation is to maximize short-term returns regardless of human cost, then I invite you to tender your resignation. Because that's not the company I'm leading anymore. 2 board members had resigned. Marcus replaced them with people who shared his new vision, including a single father who'd worked his way up from the mailroom and a woman who'd spent years in nonprofit management. The Singapore investors had been surprisingly supportive once he explained his reasoning. Companies that treat workers well are better long-term investments, one had said. This is smart business, not just good ethics. Maybe they were right. Or maybe it didn't matter. Either way, it was right. Sophia ran up to him, wearing a little dress with flowers that Elena had bought with her first paycheck from the new position. Marcus.
Come see.
We painted pictures. She dropped the Mr. weeks ago. Now he was just Marcus, which somehow meant more than any title he'd ever held. Show me, he said, letting her pull him toward the art area. Her painting was abstract, splashes of color that might have been flowers or fireworks or pure emotion. It's beautiful, Marcus said honestly. It's for you. For your office. So you remember. Remember what? That sometimes sad people just need songs and colors. And that's okay. Marcus knelt down. I level with this small prophet. Thank you, Sophia. I'll hang it right behind my desk. Promise. Promise. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was simple. A few words from Marcus about the importance of supporting employees as whole people. Thanks to Elena for her vision and tireless work. A ceremonial snip of the ribbon with those oversized scissors that looked ridiculous but were apparently mandatory for such occasions. As he cut the ribbon, Marcus caught Elena's eye. She was crying, happy tears this time, and Sophia was clapping enthusiastically, Mr. Floppy tucked securely under her arm. Afterward, as people mingled and children explored the new space, Marcus found a quiet corner. He pulled out his phone and looked at his schedule, once packed with back-to-back meetings, now deliberately spacious. Room to think, room to breathe, room to be human. He had a call with his new therapist tomorrow. Lunch with an old friend from college he'd reconnected with, someone he'd lost touch with decades ago in the pursuit of success. Saturday morning was reserved for volunteering at a children's hospital, something he'd started doing because Elena mentioned how much it would mean to families who are going through the hardest times of their lives. His calendar looked emptier than it had in 30 years. It had never felt fuller. Marcus. Elena approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this. Thank you. He accepted the cup, and they stood together watching the children play. You did this, you know. This is your achievement. We did it together. I signed the checks. You made it real. Elena smiled. Well, someone had to make sure you didn't install some fancy marble fountain instead of proper changing tables. He laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from the belly. Fair point. I would have absolutely done that. I know. Rich people love unnecessary fountains. They were quiet for a moment, comfortable in the silence. How's the transition going? Elena asked. With the new CEO? Remarkably well. Jennifer's exceptional. Better than I was, honestly. She has ideas I never would have thought of. It's humbling. And that's okay? It's better than okay. It's freeing. Marcus sipped his coffee. I spent so long thinking the company would fall apart without me. Turns out it's thriving. Turns out I was holding it back by not being willing to let go. So, what's next for you? Besides this. She gestured at the childcare center. I don't know exactly. I'm exploring some philanthropy work. Education initiatives. Maybe investing in small businesses owned by people who have great ideas but no access to capital. I'm meeting with some people next week about a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. That sounds perfect for you. Does it? Marcus turned to look at her. A year ago, I would have said the perfect thing for me was acquiring another company or breaking into a new market. Now that seems meaningless. It's not meaningless if it supports this, Elena said, gesturing at the center, at the children, at the life happening around them. You're just using success differently now. For connection instead of conquest. When did you become so wise? I've always been wise. You were just too busy to notice. He smiled. Fair. Sophia appeared again, this time with a little boy in tow. Marcus, this is David. His mama works on the computers. Can David come to the park with us tomorrow? Marcus looked at Elena, who nodded. If David's mother says yes, then absolutely. Yay! Both children ran off, already planning their park adventure. She's adopted you, you know, Elena said quietly. You're part of her life now. Part of our life. I hope that's okay. More than okay. But Marcus, you know this isn't a project you can complete and move on from, right? Sophia doesn't understand that sometimes adults drift apart when the novelty wears off. If you're going to be in her life, you need to stay in her life. I'm not going anywhere, Marcus said firmly. That little girl saved me. I owe her everything. You don't owe her anything. That's not how this works. Then what do I owe? Elena considered this. Just show up. Be present. Let yourself care and be cared for. That's all any of us can do. Show up. Be present. Care and be cared for. Simple instructions that had somehow taken him 52 years to understand. I can do that, Marcus said. And he meant it. That evening, Marcus returned to his penthouse, which felt less cold now, though nothing about the physical space had changed. He'd started keeping fresh flowers in the kitchen, had bought some comfortable furniture for the balcony where he now sat sometimes, just watching the city without needing to control it. He hung Sophia's painting behind his desk as promised, right where he could see it every day. The splashes of color looked ridiculous among his minimalist decor, which made it perfect.
His phone rang.
For a moment, old habits almost made him ignore it. Work could wait, but then he saw the caller ID. Catherine, his ex-wife. They'd reconnected recently, tentatively, after he'd reached out to apologize for the man he'd been during their marriage. She'd been surprised, skeptical at first, but willing to talk. They'd met for coffee twice. It wasn't romantic. That ship had sailed years ago, but it was something. Friendship, maybe. Or, at least, mutual respect. Catherine, he answered. This is a surprise. Hi, Marcus. I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. What's up? I wanted to tell you that I saw the article in the Times about the childcare center and the company changes. It's really impressive. Thank you. I mean it. That's not the Marcus Thorne I knew. In the best possible way. He smiled. I'm trying to be better. You're succeeding. A pause. I'm proud of you. I know I don't have the right to say that anymore, but you have every right, Marcus interrupted gently. You tried to tell me, years ago, that I was losing myself. I didn't listen. I wish I had. We can't change the past.
No.
But we can do better going forward. They talked for a while longer, careful conversation between two people learning to be friends after being strangers after being spouses. When they hung up, Marcus felt lighter. He walked out onto the balcony and looked at the city. Somewhere out there, Elena was probably putting Sophia to bed. Probably singing one of those lullabies that had changed everything. Probably tucking Mr. Floppy in beside her daughter, making sure the worn rabbit was positioned just right. Somewhere out there, 43 children were sleeping safely because their parents could afford quality childcare. Thousands of employees were going to work tomorrow knowing they earned a living wage and had benefits that actually protected them. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was a start. Marcus closed his eyes and, for the first time in his life, let himself feel truly grateful. Not for what he'd accomplished or acquired, but for what he'd been given. A chance to change. A reason to be better. A 3-year-old girl who'd seen his sadness and decided to sing. The city hummed below, indifferent to his transformation. But Marcus was different now. He'd been tired, so terribly tired, and a child's lullaby had given him rest.
Not the sleep kind of rest. The soul kind.
The kind that mattered. And tomorrow, he'd wake up and continue the work of becoming someone worthy of that gift. Someone present. Someone caring. Someone human. Just Marcus. Not the billionaire. Not the CEO. Not the titan of industry. Just a man learning, finally, to live. The night air was cool. The stars were dim against the city lights. And Marcus Thorne, standing on his balcony holding nothing but possibilities, finally understood what it meant to be rich. The end. Yellow heart. Sometimes the most profound transformations come from the smallest voices. Sometimes wisdom arrives in worn stuffed animals and wobbling songs. Sometimes salvation looks like a 3-year-old offering comfort to a stranger who forgot he needed it. And sometimes, just sometimes, a lullaby is exactly what a tired soul requires to finally rest.